Welcome to Success in Brief. I'm your host, Rosanne Felicello. In every episode, we spotlight successful women in the law. We discuss with them their journey to success. We talk about the difficulties and the trade-offs, along with the highlights and the benefits, and about what success means to each of them. We hope to inspire you with these stories on your own path to success. Hello, my name is Rosanne Felicello, and this is Success in Brief. I'm thrilled today to welcome Reasa Currier to our podcast. Reasa is the director of Fairfax County Department of Animal Sheltering, and she has spent most of her professional career with organizations focused on the humane treatment of animals. She has held previous positions at the Humane Rescue Alliance and the Humane Society of the United States. Earlier in her career, Reasa served as counsel at the U.S. Department of Transportation, and she also worked as counsel in the United States House of Representatives. I'm excited to speak to Reasa and hear more about her success. Reasa, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Rosanne.
Let's jump right in. What was your path to becoming an attorney? Did you have any attorneys in your family growing up? How did you get there?
I didn't really have any examples of attorneys. And I wish I could say it came from something like Ally McBeal or something like that, TV show influence, but it was really just something I always wanted to be an advocate for the causes I believed in. And a lot of the skills, writing and reading and speaking just seemed like they lined up and opened a path into the law for me.
Great. And so what did you think about law school once you got there, given you didn't really have any examples in front of you?
You know what? I'm one of those rare people that actually really enjoyed law school. I enjoyed learning about the cases. I enjoyed becoming a better writer and learning how to just take a lot of information and quickly distill the essential facts and how to represent and advocate for a client. So I thought it was a lot of fun. In a strange way, I think there was definitely some painful points. I think civil procedure and contracts were two courses that I didn't particularly enjoy, but I did really enjoy courses that I didn't think I would like business organizations and law in the regulatory estate and decedents estate and constitutional law, because so much of what you're learning in law school is really teaching you about the American system of government and how to be an informed and educated citizen of our country. And it's very empowering and it's enlightening. And so I really enjoyed a lot of that content.
You went to law school out in Arizona, right? And as well as undergrad there, is that right?
That's right. So I'm from Arizona. So I was lured in by the very affordable tuition prices. And of course, wearing flip-flops year round didn't hurt. So I stayed and went and did my undergraduate at the University of Arizona in Tucson. So I was exactly an hour and a half away from my mother, which required her to call before she got in the car to come see me. And then for law school, I did apply all over the country and was really wanted to go to an East Coast school. But just the tuition and my thought is I was going to go into nonprofit or government at some point, and I didn't want to take on all the student loan debt. And so a woman I knew who also had gone to law school and was working for a nonprofit, she said, go where you can get an affordable education. And boy, was that great advice, because my tuition at ASU, I mean, of course, this was quite some time ago, was about $11,000 a year at law school, which, was just non-existent at the time. And it had, and I think for a lot of people with the state schools, ASU, we had an average student to teacher ratio of 16 students to one teacher. And so it was just really wonderful education. And of course, having sunshine and being able to study poolside is a really nice fringe benefit.
There's a great draws there. So, first of all, I think that is fantastic advice. And I think that law school and college has only gotten exponentially more expensive now and out of reach in some ways. But especially if you're planning on not doing the big law route, you really should, be mindful that you don't want to have a financial sort of weight on your back that you have to then pay off, for the next 20 years. Because I know people that are still paying off law school loans, today. They graduated law school almost 20 years ago. So
Oh,
something to avoid if possible.
it's a huge factor, and I think any advanced degree is really looking at factoring in, sitting down and doing those calculations. What's your salary going to be versus what is your student loan payment? I mean, some people, they have parents when they were able to get their school paid for, but I paid my way through most of undergraduate and also through law school. So cost was a really big factor and where I ultimately decided to go to school. And I was, at the end of the day, I had that law degree in hand. I passed the bar. And so ESU was a wonderful choice and a wonderful experience for me.
I remember the financial aid office at my law school used to have a sign on the door that said, yes, if you live like a lawyer while you're a student, you're going to live like a student while you're a lawyer. And
That's
I think that's
exactly right. Yeah. And that's also something, if folks are considering going to law school, looking at the cost of living in the city where the law school is. I mean, Phoenix at the time when I went to school is very affordable. And so very different from East Coast and students having to make really challenging choices with trying to find housing that's in their price range.
we used to have, four of us in an apartment. But, that was normal.
Oh, yeah. Yes, you have to be comfortable with intimacy.
So you did eventually get to the East Coast, though, because you're in Fairfax County. So how did you make the transition from Arizona to the East Coast?
Yes. So in my third year of law school, I had the opportunity to, well, first I'll back up a little bit. I spent both my summers of law school working for the Humane Society of the United States in their DC office. And so I really, during that time, got exposed to um, the DC environment and as they say, caught the swamp fever and decided, well, this is really where I want to spend my career. Because if you want to make change and you want to effectuate change in your field, DC and New York, but DC for policy is definitely the place to do it. And um, so my third year of law school, through my contacts at the Humane Society of the United States, we were able to start a ballot initiative in Arizona. Arizona is one of the few states that actually allow the ballot initiative process. And we started a ballot initiative to ban veal and gestation crates, which are forms of confinement for animals on factory farms. And veal crates, of course, are used for veal cows, and gestation crates are used for pregnant pigs. And so I worked with the HSUS through that whole process, and we were able to get that initiative on the ballot successfully. And then the Arizona voters passed it but with a 60% margin, which is very huge. It was a
Great.
wonderful victory and had nationwide impact for farm animals around the country. And so at that point, I was uh, really centered on wanting to have a career in animal welfare and go back and work for HSUS in DC. But then again, that financial aspect kind of kicked in, and I had student loans that I needed to pay. And I also recognized that I had a lot to learn as a young lawyer, and I really wanted to understand how the government worked. And so I had applied for the Presidential Management Fellowship, which there's a couple tracks through the federal government you can pursue if you're interested in going. I mean, of course, you can apply for a council job, but then you can also look at an honors attorney position that they have. They have that program, and then they also have the Presidential Management Fellowship program, and that is a developmental program through the federal government. And so I was able to get selected as a PMF and secured a position at the Department of Transportation. And so that's what ultimately took me to DC, fresh out of law school.
Looks great. So that was your first job in law school. That's fantastic. So what kind of skills and things do you remember picking up in that position?
You know what? That was I spent almost 5 years working with for the federal government, and I really looked at that as almost like a postdoctorate or an additional graduate degree. And I always tell um, students when they're interested in getting involved in policy, either regulation or legislation, my advice is always try to get a position working on Capitol Hill. And you might start by answering the phones or in the mailroom, but you will quickly move up and you will quickly get a portfolio where you are juggling a lot of different things and a lot of different portfolios, but you are part of the decision making process and you are seeing how that process happens and how lawmakers are influenced. And so I think I mean, I could spend the whole podcast talking about what I learned in those years with the federal government because I was working on the administrative side, working for the administration, but then I also ended up working for committee staff as part of that program I was detailed to to the committee that I was liaisoning with. And so you really see both sides, right? When you're trying to move a bill through Congress, you have the administration pushing for pieces, then you have Congress who ultimately is holding the purse strings. And seeing that collaborative or sometimes really not collaborative process, it is learning. And I also had the opportunity to work on regulations as well and see that process. Um, and so I think ultimately, um, for any young lawyer who wants to influence change through policy, I think the investment in going to work for the federal government is a great one. And I think it's a great place to be a lawyer. You're learning a lot, you have job security. And my experience in the Department of Transportation is this it was a wonderful culture. It was a wonderful environment. I had so many people that were truly invested in me and helping me grow and learn and we're mentors and supporters and advocates for my professional development. And of course, I didn't know that, right? As a young person, that was my first job, and it's something that I've carried with me always. And how I had that opportunity to have so many wonderful leaders invest in me, and that's something I try to pay it forward today.
And did you straddle more than one administration while you were there?
I sure did. So I started, and it was George W. Bush, and then I was there through the transition into President Obama, and that was fascinating because my portfolio is I was working on public transit, and so to see the two administrations have quite a different approach to public transit and the value that they placed on transit and investment in advancing transit projects around the country.
And the different viewpoints really did trickle down to the policy level, right? I mean, that's just so fascinating, I think.
Uh-huh.
Were you given sort of different directives under each administration, I expect?
We were. I mean, I think though, especially the work that I was doing, which is liaisoning with Capitol Hill and seeing that shift, the priorities definitely shifted between the two administrations, and President Obama, like President Biden, that we're seeing today, has just a very, you know, public transit and making sure all Americans can get where they need to go is a big priority.
And it's so important, especially as, the infrastructure continues to decay, around the country, that there be money and resources put into it. So that's fascinating.
Absolutely.
So after your time in the federal government, though, it looks like you took a few years off from working. So Tell me about that and what caused that shift for you.
So I took some time off. I ended up having two children in less than 2 years, and then a spouse with a very busy job. And he's my husband is also a reservist in the military, so he had two jobs that were very busy, and so trying to balance all of those. Um, and so I decided to leave the federal government. And I mean, back when I was there, teleworking wasn't really an option. There wasn't a lot of flexibility built in to the work environment that I was in. And of course, we see that as things, pandemic just did a huge shift, right? And now so because, we've created more flexibility. And so now working moms can um, don't have to have that disruption in their career. But at that time, it was something that I felt like I needed to do for my young family. And so I did take some time off. And during that time, I also just had a lot of time to really think about what I wanted for the next steps in my career. I knew I wanted to return to the workforce. And I I was living in Virginia at the time, in Northern Virginia, just in Fairfax County, where I am today, just outside of the DC area. And I started paying closer attention to what was happening in the Virginia General Assembly, which is the state government, um, the elected body where I lived. And I started to see that uh, the advocates were trying to get through just basic protections for animals. And every single session, it was like the same group of legislators were obstructionist. And it was like things like, we want to give a dog 3 more feet on a chain. It wasn't anything radical. It was just things that would make a big difference in the lives of these dogs that were living outdoors. And um, then there was also an issue of in Virginia, there's a sport, I'm quoting, called fox pinning, where what would happen is um, foxes are trapped from the wild and placed in an enclosure, and then people bring their dogs in to try to capture the foxes. And bets are made. It's essentially a gaming activity. And so that's what's happening in Virginia. And so advocates tried to ban that for several years, and had been unsuccessful. And this just seemed shocking to me, that this type of engagement, this isn't hunting. No free chase was involved, and I couldn't understand why we were allowing this in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so I ended up getting together with a few friends, and we formed a political action committee in Virginia. And it was the first of its kind, a political action committee to represent animals in the Commonwealth. And so um, we named this organization Humane to Million, and what we did was essentially create a voice for the animals in Virginia through the political system. I didn't really know what a PAC was. I actually had to Google it.
No.
But it's just one of those things that it seems like the right thing to do based on the little bit that I knew.
Uh-huh.
And so just the right people came together and the right doors opened. And so so during that time where I was home, I was able to form that organization and really create change in the Virginia General Assembly.
That's fantastic. So you were still busy.
Well, yes, even if I was just home with those little ones, I would have been busy. But adding the humane to it was a nice intellectual outlet for me, and it was something that I could do once I put the kids to bed. And you know what? I showed up the Virginia General Assembly with those two little ones in a stroller many times, and they learned about the government process at a very young age. I'll just say that.
Nah. It's wonderful. I actually think it's great for kids to see their both their parents participating in public, whether it's going to the legislature or appearing in court or doing their job, just seeing that they're able to speak up in their community, I think is very important.
Yeah, it is important. I mean, we're away from our kids a lot from in order to do these jobs. And I think to help them understand what we do all day when we're separated from them is really important, and bring them in and help them understand. When I was one thing that my son said when he was small, and I was working for HSUS, doing policy and regulatory work, he said to me at some point he wanted my attention for something and I wasn't able to give it to him. And he said, "You know what? You say you spend your days helping animals, but I never see you actually helping an animal." He had this idea that I'd be like, saving animals along the side of the road, which we do. But it's like he expected this direct, like, understand, obviously, at a very young age, that you're doing things through the computer and on the phone that actually impact the animals as well.
Nothing like kids to call it black or white, right?
Exactly.
They're the best. So, in November 2014, you went back into more of a full-time position at the Humane Society of the United States. So you shifted from federal government to full-time, animal welfare, basically. So, what made you decide on making that shift?
Well, I was ready to go back into the workforce, and going back into a nonprofit and working for the Humane Society of the United States, which is the largest animal welfare organization in the world. They have a very large presence in every state in the United States, and then also around the world. They have about 70 different um, 7 country offices right now. And so they are a legislative, regulatory, and corporate reform, really a lobbying litigation focused organization. So that was a very natural segue for me, and using my law degree, but then doing it to advocate for animals. And at HSUS, I got to work on state issues. So I worked in Tennessee on animal fighting and was able to get a bill passed strengthening the state law for animal fighting. And then I was also able to work on federal and even international laws. And so it was just such an exciting and interesting place to be. And I wasn't necessarily practicing law. I wasn't um, working in their counsel's office, but there's no question every single day I used my law degree when I was working there.
That sounds like a great position. And you held that for almost 4 years. And then you moved on to the Human Rescue Alliance. Is that the right order of events? Did I get
Yeah.
that right?
And so I was at HSUS, yes, so for about four years, and then moving to the Humane Rescue Alliance, which is a sheltering organization based in Washington D.C. And um, DC and HRA is a direct care organization. So that was my first time moving into an organization that, my office is upstairs and downstairs are hundreds of animals. And so it was a really community based organization. So HRA had been serving the DC community for 150 years through its legacy organizations, and truly had a hyper local approach, just very deeply based, very deep roots into the community. And so after working at this very macro level, I really wanted to do something where you are building something and you are effectuating change through your relationships with people. And I think working through two different administrations, and then at HSUS, working through three, I worked through the Trump administration, engaging with the Trump administration and also on Capitol Hill. You see that all the things that we got done through the Obama administration, through regulation, executive orders, were suddenly dismantled. And so it made you realize how fragile this system is, right? And how it was sort of this awareness that if you want to change things, truly make a difference for animals, it might be through that person to person contact. Um, Mother Teresa has a saying that if you want to create change, don't wait for the leaders to do it person to person. And so that really inspired my decision to move to an organization that was doing that work in a very grassroots way. And um, I also, I think at that point, I needed to have that connection with animals in my career. I'd been so removed, and I was doing a lot of work for animals that are really in the shadows. So, farm animals and wildlife, animals that I wasn't necessarily seeing, but I was trying to speak for them in these legislative bodies. And so, um, I needed a little bit of time just to restore my connection with the work and the cause, and moving to an organization where the animals are right there and the people that needed help coming in through our front doors. So that was a very powerful transition in my career, and something that really helped me regather and think about kind of the next season and the next shift of what I wanted to do professionally.
Sure. So at HRA, they're rescuing animals. Are these animals that are homeless? Is that who they're rescuing generally?
Yes, so HRA is the Open Admission Shelter for Washington, D.C. It's a private organization. And so they have a contract with the District of Columbia to provide sheltering services for the animals. And they also provide animal control. So when you call and you see a stray animal or an animal that's been abused or neglected, it was our officers that would respond. And then during my time at HRA, we actually went through a merger with an organization just outside New York. It's called St. Hubert's Animal Welfare Center. It's in New Jersey in the Madison area, and they had three campuses. And so during my time as an executive there, I got to be part of the organization doubling in size. And so we went from two campuses in DC to through adding three more campuses in the New Jersey area, doubling in staff, really refocusing our mission, and taking, and we ended up having 16 animal control contracts. And so going through that process of how you double an organization pretty much overnight. I mean, you're working, and then all of a sudden it happens. And so that was an incredible learning experience, and something I think not many people get to go through a process like that. And I'm using a lot of the lessons from going through that merger today in my position.
Let's talk about it. About a year ago, you left Human Rescue Alliance and joined Fairfax County Department of Animal Sheltering as the director. So, what brought about that change? What made you decide to make that additional shift? And tell us a little bit about your career, your job today.
Yeah, so I was at HRA, and I had a couple people reach out and said this job was coming up. The current director is retiring, and of course this is my community, and a community that I felt very connected to. And so to take on the opportunity to run the only open access shelter in that community was just too good and too exciting to pass up. And so, of course, you know, moving into a director level, right? The buck stops with you. That's a lot of pressure. I wasn't sure I wanted to be in the hot seat yet. Um, but ultimately, I had a lot of conversations with people in the community and about the direction they wanted things to go with animal sheltering and animal programs. And also, Fairfax County is, and I may be a little biased, but it is truly one of the best run jurisdictions in the entire country. We have an incredible leadership team here. Our elected officials are wonderful and very friendly to animal issues. It is a community that is very passionate about animal welfare. So all those things just really contributed to my decision to move into this position. And then also, I was actually excited about the prospect of moving back to government. And I really enjoyed my time in the federal government. And I also knew moving to a municipal agency have its challenges, right? I've been in the private sector where you can kind of be lean and mean and pivot and, be creative. And I knew that municipal government meant I sort of, a lot of red tape and things will be slower, but at the same time, to have such a great infrastructure surrounding the shelter and other programs and departments to connect with was just very exciting and appealing. And so I'm very glad that I ultimately made the decision to move over to Fairfax County.
It sounds great, taking up a different role and a sort of most important role, probably at the organization as the leader. That sounds like a great shift. Um, so, did you encounter any sort of pushback in making that transition from private back into federal? Not federal, but back into government. I guess to county government.
Well, I think it was a transition. Just learning, you have to get back into lots of acronyms. And I haven't got back. It's not quite as bad as the federal government when you can communicate an entire sentence in acronyms. We're not like that here. Um, but what I found on the county level is that um, the federal government is very bureaucratic heavy, and it is very challenging to get things done. And I find on the municipal level that's just really not the case. We have been able to make some changes and move in a different direction, and it hasn't been that complicated. So one of the things that we're really trying to do is everyone thinks is the municipal shelter is kind of the place of last resort. They think of the dog pound and this, when I tell people what I do for my job, there's usually two reactions. One is, oh, how sad. I could never work there and see those poor animals every day. And then two, the other response is, oh, what a dream. I would adopt every single one of those animals. And, once you're in the shelter and you see just how much cleaning is required and how many hours our staff spend cleaning every day, that is an itch you don't need to scratch. And I'm fine leaving the empty shelter till they get the right adoptive homes. But I also can foster animals, which is very nice. So the other side of it's sad, I could never do that. And you know what? I am trying to debunk that. That is not what we're about. The shelter is a place of hope and opportunity. Animals come to us and we really give them all the tools they need to have their second chance. So if they need behavior modification, we have a trainer on staff. We also have a bunch of wonderful volunteers that are trained in behavior modification and training. And then we also have an amazing contract with a veterinary provider. So we had a little dog come to us recently named Buttercup. Buttercup was found on the side of the road, and a puppy, a little German Shepherd puppy, and his back legs were completely paralyzed. He had a curved spine. And our initial assessment of Buttercup was he has some serious issues and euthanasia might be the best option. But we had some consultations with a couple different vets and decided, you know what, we can treat Buttercup. We can provide him with the support he needs to be successful. And we ended up getting Buttercup into water therapy. And so Buttercup was able to work, use his back legs, and was able to heal during his time with us. And because of all the attention and love he received in our care, Buttercup is walking and he was just recently adopted this weekend. And so that is the kind of shelter that we're trying to build, a place where animals really do get the second chance that they need. And we are also trying to make sure that we have a kind of organization that's giving the second chances that the people of our community need. And it's very challenging right now to be a pet owner. And it's challenging.
Expensive, right? Very expensive.
It's very expensive, and so veterinary care is incredibly costly. And not only is it costly, but it's also difficult to get because we're experiencing a nationwide veterinary shortage. So that's a factor. But the other thing that we're seeing in Fairfax County, and it's also a challenge up in your area and really nationwide, is the lack of pet friendly housing. So you know that about 70% of Americans have at least one pet, but then the availability of housing that allows those pets is just shrinking. And so it's really difficult for renters to find housing that accommodates their pets. And so um, that is something that housing is a big issue, obviously, for anybody to tackle. But we are working with our county's housing administration and also building relationships and bridges with other organizations working in this space to see if we can create some long term solutions. So, uh, families that have pets are having to make those hard decisions between keeping their pet and keeping a roof over their head.
It's important work, and especially in these trying times for a lot of people not having it. I mean, it's hard enough to have access to healthcare as a human, and even harder, I think, to have healthcare for our animals sometimes.
It is.
Do you feel that your sort of perspective as a woman has affected sort of how you do your job, or your perspective on how you should be doing your job? How the fact that you're a female has had any effect at all on your career?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. I absolutely, absolutely. When I was working at the Department of Transportation, I think I, I'm this statistic may not be completely right, but I think about 90% of the department at that time was male. And the experience I had there was that obviously being a female and being a minority of mostly male workforce, it taught me a lot. And it in communication and engagement. And now I work in an industry that's mostly women led. And for example, at Fairfax County Animal Shelter, my leadership team is all women. And so that too comes with its own challenges. And also its own set of opportunities. And so I think it definitely shapes how I lead and how I communicate and engage. Um, and it also, I'm aware of the blind spots because we're serving everyone in the county, not just women. And so we need to make sure our communication and our messaging and how we engage is inclusive of everyone. And so yes, it does. I think that being a female leader and um, I definitely I've been at places in my career where I've tried to maybe suppress those things that kind of make me, like my empathy and emotion and sensitivity. And I think I have found my stride, and I'm very comfortable with empathy and being caring and being a natural part of how I lead with my staff and being communicative and available. And I think those aren't characteristics that are inherently just female, but I think that's something as women that we may be a little stronger.
And we also sometimes feel more self-conscious about. So, stronger in, but also feel like we shouldn't be showing that side of us. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So you've made a number of different shifts in your career, as we've discussed through the years. As you made those changes, did you rely on others for career advice? Or the specific people that you went to, or did you rely mainly on your own counsel? How did you go about making those important decisions?
That's a difficult question. I think um, I when I make decisions, I often consult. I'm a think out loud person, so I do like to consult people that I respect and I value their opinion. And so any shift I made was based on reflective conversations, including my husband and friends. And I'm very fortunate that um, some of the women I went to law school with and or met during that time, I still seek their counsel and their wisdom as we're all kind of navigating our careers in very different ways. Um, but I also, for me, those decisions are also very personal, and I always try when I'm looking at two options to choose the one where I always choose the bigger life. Choose the choice, make the choice that maybe is going to push me, where I'm going to be uncomfortable, where I'm going to grow, and there may be uncertainty. And rather than the one that I'll feel safe and comfortable. And so I still feel very fortunate that in this position, I get to learn every single day. And I have amazing people that I work with, and they are incredible teachers, and I get to grow and learn from them. And that I also have an incredible community that is teaching me things and showing me where their values are. So, so that's really, I feel very confident in the decision that I made with moving to this position as a learning and growing opportunity. I'm not ready to just glide yet.
I, I love that. And it's important to be, comfortable with being uncomfortable, I guess is the
Absolutely.
saying. And I think it's definitely something to live by. So speaking about living, you do have a life outside of your career. So how do you balance it all? Especially now that you're back to full time, such a big job and as a director of the whole department.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, I don't think I do balance it. It's, uh, I think it's a day by day thing. I have a spouse who he was able to shift his career a little bit, so he's more present and around for our family. That's made a huge change, and me being able to really lean in and focus on the work that I'm doing because I'm out of the house. Um, I 5 days a week at least. And, this job, there's also evening and weekend commitments. And so trying to juggle that around my son's lacrosse game schedule. So it's having that support has been really important. But I think I actually spent a lot of time this weekend thinking about that because it's important to try to have a life and your life not become your job. That's really tricky with work with animal welfare because for all of us that work in this field, it's a vocation. We're here because we feel deeply committed to the mission. And these animals that are in our care, they have no one else. It's us, and we are their voice. And we have a duty to provide exceptional care to them. And also to our community. And so it's difficult to turn that off, but I do try to compartmentalize it and make sure that there's times that my staff know I'm not available and only to call if it's an emergency. And also, I've just been able to really bring in wonderful staff that are fantastic leaders in their own right. And so I have that confidence that nothing's going to fall through the cracks. But we've got layers of really good, strong leaders at this organization, and that definitely helps with compartmentalizing and creating that space. So I'm not just thinking about work all the time. But I think one of the biggest things for me is regular exercise. Um, and I try to get up very early every morning. And I just exercise in my basement if it's bad weather, or outside if it's good weather. And honestly, that's just been one of the best things. Not even just the physical; that's completely separate. But just the mental, the emotional, um, and I feel like I can uh, get through the day a lot better. And have better mental clarity if I do that first thing in the morning and just create that time for myself before everybody else gets up. And because then once the children are awake, you're launched out of a cannon, and you don't know which direction you're going to go. It's found out, every day is an adventure.
I'm 100% in agreement. I think that exercise has not been taught well enough as really the sort of the best thing you can do for your mental health. Above sort of anything else, but getting in that time is so important every day. I know for me, it is, and I think it is for most people, but most people don't do it, and most people don't take the time. But, if you get to a certain place in life, you learn that, I know that I can't function at the same level.
Yeah.
I don't get, I don't get the exercise time in as well. So,
Well, and that just comes with, right, all your care. I mean, exercise is incredibly important, and just having that time where your mind is just focused on, you know, being outdoors, not worrying about work, or just the endorphins and everything you get from that. I definitely agree that it's a huge mental health um, piece. And I recently read an article how exercise, they say, is now more effective than any kind of drugs for depression and anxiety. That aerobic exercise, especially when you're breaking a sweat and getting your heart rate. So I think we're just beginning to understand how important it is for mental and emotional health as well. And then for me also, um, you know, doing things that I didn't do as well in my 20s and 30s, like drinking water. You got to drink your water. You can't just live all day long. And I've been eating a plant-based diet for over 20 years. And so that's something to getting all your vegetables and that kind of thing. All of that matters when you get to a certain age. And when you're younger, you can get through eating nachos and
yeah,
you get away with
fun,
it.
right?
It's up with you. It always does. So
I agree. Okay, so the last three questions are the rapid fire questions, supposedly, but they're not hard, but they should be fun. We'll see. Um, so you don't really practice mainly as an attorney now, right? You're more just you're not just you're a director. It's a different role. I'm probably drawing still on some of your skills from law school, but also other skills other than researching things on Lexis. I'm sure. So but if you didn't go to law school, what career would you have got into?
you know, I wouldn't I wouldn't change a thing. I'm so glad I went to law school. I think that it's a wonderful foundation for whatever you do. And it helps you to analyze a lot of information very quickly, to distill really essential components and key arguments, key points, to be an analytical thinker. And also to when you're writing, I always know when I'm reading something a lawyer has written, you're like, oh, here, look, here's the key points at the top of the email, and buried at the bottom. And so I think just for those reasons alone, and again, just for all that my experience in law school, the friends that I made, the lessons I learned, I would do it again, and I wouldn't change a thing.
No, that's great. And what is the one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you graduated law school?
Well, we were talking earlier about planning, and I think I would have spent some more time in my third year of law school talking to people that were in their careers, and just getting their knowledge and wisdom, and really maybe set out a better plan for where I think to go. And a lot of my career was just, I felt sort of falling into one thing to the next as the opportunity presented. I didn't really have a strategy. And part of that, right, is the beauty of life because, you get married, you have children, you have things happen, and your goals and priorities change. And so I think you have to have some spontaneity in that plan. But I think I would have spent more time, I wish I had, talking to people and getting their feedback and guidance as I charted a course for where I wanted to go.
Yeah. And one thing we did discuss though too, just prior to the podcast is no matter how much planning you do, you really can't predict where you're gonna go. Right. And so I think you never know what's coming. And so you do have to have a bit of hard edge or a bit of ability to um, transition, right? And to go with the flow a little bit as things change over time. So
Absolutely.
resilience. There we go. Resiliency.
Yeah, resiliency and being adaptive are I think two of the most important qualities for any emerging lawyer.
Yeah. We don't even know where our profession's going now that, AI is taking over. So
Yeah, what an interesting development I think for all of us in every aspect of our life. Um, to see what happens. Mhm.
it's going to be interesting. The last question, Risa, is would you recommend a career in law to women considering law school today?
Well, as you stated, I have had a very unconventional career, but I would absolutely recommend it. I think it really prepares you for anything, especially if you want to go into policy. I know many people get masters in public policy, and that's a wonderful degree to have under your belt. But I really feel strongly about the skills that a law degree gives you, and you can use it. And so I have friends that have gone into fundraising and um, political work and are leading corporations. And so you just really see how it's a great degree and it will open doors for you. And so I think it's a very worthy investment of time and money.
Then agree. And Risa, on that, I thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much, Rosanne. It was a lot of fun to talk to you.
You've been listening to Success in Brief with your host, Rosanne Felicello. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing the show with others. You can catch prior episodes at www.felicellolaw.com and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Twitter, and more.